The amazing account of the apparition of Guadalupe is very closely linked with the early development of Mexico, and there seems to be some evidence that it may have even influenced the course of its history. In 1519, the Spanish forces led by Hernán Cortés arrived on the shores of a confederation of city-states known as the Aztec Empire. Taking advantage of the strife and dissension that had long been festering within, Cortés was able in 2 years to capture and destroy the fabled island city of Tenochtitlan, execute Montezuma their king, and subdue the empire. Soon afterwards, the missionaries of the Roman Catholic Church helped extend the frontiers of the territory, and by 1528, the crown had established a court of executive powers called an audiencia. Initially, these white-skinned invaders were hailed as liberators, for the Aztecs had been tyrannical in their rule. But the first audiencia was cruel and abusive in its treatment of Aztec leaders and condescending to the natives, that soon small pockets of rebellion broke out. To counteract the jurisdiction of the audiencia and to defend the local inhabitants from abuse, Charles V appointed a pious and learned man, Franciscan prior Juan Zumárraga, as first bishop of the New World. Zumárraga soon realized that a general insurrection was close at hand, so he begged the Virgin for help and secretly asked her to send him some Castilian roses as a sign that his prayer had been heard. It was in this setting that the Virgin made her entrance to the Americas and into the heart of an Aztec Indian.
Juan Diego had welcomed the release from the dreaded human sacrifices of the Aztec rule and joyfully converted to the Catholic faith. Shortly after he had remarried according to the Catholic rites, his wife died, leaving him a childless widower at the age of 57. Despite his sorrow, he faithfully attended catechetical instruction, and it was to participate at Mass in honor of the Virgin Mother that he set out on the morning of December 9, 1531. He crossed Tepeyac Hill, where Tonantzin, the grim mother goddess of the Aztecs, had once been worshipped, and was startled to hear the sound of birds singing sweetly. As he looked up through the dazzling light, he heard a gentle and insistent young voice calling affectionately out to him from the summit. Juan, Juanito, Juan Dieguito. Drawn to the mysterious summons, he hastily climbed the slope, and reaching the peak, suddenly found himself face to face with a young girl of overpowering brilliance and beauty. She appeared to be only 14, and her garments shone like the sun and seemed to radiate onto the surrounding rocks and thorny bushes. She beckoned him to approach and greeted him in Nahuatl, his mother tongue. Juanito, smallest and dearest of my children, where are you going? Addressing her as my lady and my child, he explained that he was on his way to Mass. She smiled and said, "Know for certain, dearest of my sons, that I am the perfect and perpetual Virgin Mary, Mother of the true God, through whom everything lives, the Lord of all things near and far, who is Master of heaven and earth. I ardently desire a temple be built here for me, where I will show and offer all my love, my compassion, my help, and my protection to the people. I am your merciful mother, the mother of all who live united in this land, and of all mankind, of all those who love me, of those who cry to me, of those who have confidence in me. Here, I will hear their weeping and their sorrows, and will remedy and alleviate their sufferings, necessities, and misfortunes. Therefore, in order to realize my intentions, go to the Lord Bishop of Tenochtitlan and tell him all that you have seen and heard. Be assured that I shall be very grateful and will reward you for doing diligently what I have asked of you. Now that you have heard my request, least of my sons, go and do your utmost." And thus, with every word impressed onto his memory, began the narrative of Juan Diego and the Virgin of the Americas. Juan Diego did as the Virgin had requested and was received courteously by Zumarraga, who, though impressed by the Indian's humility and sincerity, was skeptical. Juan went back to the Virgin to beg pardon for his failure and implored her to entrust this mission to someone important and well-respected, as he was only a peasant of no standing. The Virgin calmly looked into his eyes and said, "Listen, smallest of my beloved children, and understand that I have many servants and ambassadors to whom I can entrust my message, so that my will could be fulfilled. But it is important that you speak for me in this matter, tired as you are. I urge you, least of my sons, that you go again tomorrow to see the bishop and represent me. Tell him in my name and make him understand that he should erect the temple for which I ask, and repeat to him that it is I, in person, the ever-Virgin Mary, Mother of God, who send you." Juan Diego knew that the bishop would not be pleased to see him so soon, but carried out the Virgin's command, and after waiting for several hours, tearfully knelt before the bishop and repeated the message. Intrigued, Zumarraga cross-examined him, and though the Indian never contradicted himself, and the bishop realized that as a convert, Juan would not have had much chance to hear of the rare apparitions of the Virgin, he could not be sure, and said that he would not act unless there was a sign from heaven. So Juan left, promising to ask the lady for a sign that he could bring back with him, and was trailed by the bishop's men, who somehow lost sight of him as they reached Tepeyac. Juan again climbed the slope and relayed the bishop's request. The lady agreed and told him to return in the morning for the sign, and ended by saying, "Do not forget my gratitude. I will await you here. Do not forget me." Filled with joy at his success, Juan decided to visit his foster father, his uncle Juan Bernardino, but arrived to find him seriously ill. All that night and the following day, Juan Diego stayed by the old man's bedside, attending to all his needs. It is not known if he did forget or simply decided not to keep his appointment with the Mother of God. Juan Bernardino's condition deteriorated, and at 4 in the morning of Tuesday, December 12th, Juan Diego hurriedly set off to get a priest to administer the last sacraments to his dying uncle. Realizing that he would encounter the Virgin, he decided to avoid her by going around Tepeyac. But he saw her descend from the hill in a blaze of light at an angle that would intercept him. He couldn't turn back and was embarrassed to hear her say in her gentle and compassionate manner, "Where are you going, least of my sons? And what road is this you are taking?" Like a child, he first decided to bluff it out. "My daughter, my lady, my child, how did you awaken? Are you in good health?" But then, in a subdued voice, he went on to explain what had happened, pleaded with her to forgive him, and promised that if she would be patient, as soon as he had fulfilled his duty, he would return the next day without fail to obey her command. The Virgin tenderly gazed at him, saying, "Listen, and let it penetrate your heart, my dear little son," and went on to utter the words that were to reverberate in the hearts of all her little ones all throughout the centuries. "Let nothing discourage you, nothing depress you. Let nothing alter your heart or your countenance. Also, do not fear any illness or trouble, anxiety or pain. Am I not here, who am your mother? Are you not under my shadow and protection? Am I not your fountain of life? Are you not in the fold of my mantle, in the crossing of my arms? Do not be troubled or take thought of your uncle's illness, for he will not die of this. He is well already. Is there anything else that you need?" With this, Juan Diego, in all his simplicity, believed, and surrendering his beloved uncle in faith, decided to carry out her request. Though he knew nothing could bloom in the frozen rocky soil, he did as she asked, climbed the peak, and was amazed to find a profusion of what we now call Castilian roses. Gathering them in his tilma, he brought them to her, and with her own hands, she carefully rearranged them and tied his tilma behind his neck so that they would not spill. She instructed him that as her ambassador worthy of confidence, he was to open his tilma only in the presence of the bishop and relate where and how he had gathered them and report all that had transpired. Juan was admitted and found Zumárraga surrounded by a number of important-looking persons. For fear of losing his hold on the tilma, instead of kneeling, he bowed, and recounting the morning's events, released the ends of his cloak and let the roses cascade onto the floor. Their fragrance filled the air, and Zumárraga was speechless, for here was a sign he had requested the Virgin for. He raised his eyes in wonder, and at that instant there appeared on the tilma the image of Mary, the Virgin Mother. All slowly sank to their knees, and an ancient account says that the prelate wept, and untying the knot of the tilma behind Juan Diego's neck, reverently carried the ayate cloth and hung it in his chapel wall.
There is a scarcity of original documents on the story of Juan Diego and the Virgin of the Tilma, but that can be partially attributed to the acute shortage of paper in Mexico at that time. However, there were accounts in hieroglyphic forms which were memorized by public chanters and declaimed in gatherings and village plazas. A complete narrative had also been written by a nephew of Montezuma sometime between 1548 and 1554. It was written in the Indian Nahuatl language and is known universally as the Nican Mopua. This document had disappeared during the U.S.-Mexican War of 1847, but after an extensive search, copies were finally unearthed. Other written references of that era that survived throughout the centuries, such as the wills of certain Indian nobles, documented specific miracles attributed to the tilma. But for the meantime, let us return to 1531. The bishop had prevailed upon Juan Diego to stay the night. Word quickly spread, and the next morning, hundreds joined in a triumphant procession to the cathedral. Zumárraga then proceeded to Tepeyac to view the site that the Virgin had chosen for the temple, after which he sent Juan Diego with an honor guard to his uncle's home.
According to the Nican Mopua, Juan Diego returned to find the old man sunning himself, and as a crowd gathered, he relayed the events that had transpired. The old man nodded as if he knew, and revealed his amazing postscript. A beautiful lady had appeared as he lay dying, and radiating love flooded the room with light. Juan Bernardino immediately recovered, and as he fell on his knees, the lady told him that she had intercepted his nephew and sent him to the bishop with her image on his tilma. She then requested Bernardino to inform the bishop of the title by which she wished to be known.
When Juan Bernardino, the uncle of Juan Diego, who was miraculously healed by the Blessed Mother, was asked by Bishop Zumárraga, the bishop then of Tenochtitlan, that is the ancient name of Mexico City, he recounted exactly what she asked him to tell the bishop. And the bishop was listening with his Castilian ears. He had just been assigned to Mexico. She told him it would be well to call her, as also to name her holy image, the ever-Virgin Holy Mary of Guadalupe. This is from this ancient document, Nican Mopua, where the image is recounted by an uncle of Juan Bernardino. But you can see, obviously, that this was done in conjunction with the bishop. Because as you were very well put, June, the vocal Guadalupe does not exist in the Nahuatl language of the Mexicans. They have no vocal for G, Guadalupe. They cannot say Guadalupe. They don't have D of Dalupe. Guadalupe. They cannot pronounce it. So as you very well put, what did she say? She couldn't have said Guadalupe. So why was it Guadalupe in the first place? I think we can historically explain it in the fact that Bishop Zumarraga had just come back from Sevilla. And about that time, in the 16th century, early on, they had just discovered an image of the Blessed Mother which had been hidden from the Saracens when they invaded Spain. They rediscovered this image of the Blessed Mother on the banks of the river Guadalupe in Badajoz, in Andalusia, in Spain. So when Bishop Zumarraga heard from Juan Bernardino that she was the ever-virgin Holy Mary of Guadalupe, I mean, whatever it was, he understood Guadalupe. She's been enshrined as the Blessed Mother of Guadalupe. What did she actually say? Well, you ask the Indians, and the Indians call her Chotal Inantzin Guadalupe. Now, Guadalupe sounds very similar to Guadalupe. So what does Guadalupe mean in the Nahuatl language? It means she who steps on the stone serpent. Chotal Inantzin Guadalupe, the Mother of God who steps on the stone serpent. Now what is the stone serpent? The stone serpent was Quetzalcoatl, this Venus god on earth, who was depicted as a stone serpent. And you see many images of this in the pyramids of Mexico, to whom these inhuman sacrifices were made. And so when she said, I am the Holy Mary, parang ganito, ako ay Santa Maria Guadalupe, I am the Holy Mary who steps on the serpent, it rang a bell with the Indians, the Mexicans. The human sacrifices suddenly stopped, because the Mexicans saw in this image something like a hieroglyph. You see, the language of the Aztecs was hieroglyphic symbols. They saw in this image of a woman standing in front of the sun a being that was superior to the sun. They saw her stepping on a black moon, which was another symbol for Venus. Therefore, she was superior to this Venus. And her raiment was made of stars. Therefore, she was greater than the universe itself. And this was, you'd say, instant Bible to them, instant catechism. In one picture, they saw the whole thing. And it was through the instrumentality of this woman that salvation came to this nation. And from there came the follow-up that all of this was utos. Because when they looked again at her image, while she was superior to all of these heavenly figures, she was at the same time in an attitude of obeisance, and her head was bowed in one direction. Therefore, there was somebody else who was superior to her. And the explanation why, in the space of 6 or 7 years, 5 to 7 years, 6 million Mexicans begged to be baptized. Juan Diego at the time was a convert, a recent convert. And his report on the apparition of the Blessed Mother to him was so electrifying to the Indian nation that if the figures do not, if they're correct, something like 6 million Mexicans begged to be baptized before the handful of Spanish missionaries who were then assigned to Mexico. You know, at the time, the baptismal rites were pretty long and very elaborate. You can imagine the fantastic work they had to do. And we have reports of friars dropping from exhaustion. Not only baptism, but when the Aztec women heard about marriage, they demanded to be married to their Mexican husbands. 6 million of them. It's from 1531 on, the next few years, when Juan Diego went around with the Franciscans helping in the evangelization of Mexico. You see, while you speak of the rest of the world, It's coincidental that about this time, Martin Luther in Germany had broken off from the Catholic Church because of the what they call the Reformation. He wanted to reform the Catholic Church. He ended up forming Lutheranism. And what is tragic is that 6 million Catholics joined Luther. So, call it a coincidence, but at the same time, 6 million new Catholics were born in South America.
The bishop immediately had a temporary chapel constructed, and on the 26th of December, 1531, the tilma was carried in a triumphant procession to Tepeyac. In their joy and excitement, a volley of arrows was shot into the air, and one of these struck a spectator and instantly killed him. The dead man was then carried and laid before the enshrined image, and all prayed for a miracle. The Virgin did not disappoint her children, and Spaniards and Mexicans embraced one another in joy and amazement as the dead man opened his eyes and rose, completely recovered. Bishop Zumarraga then appointed Juan Diego as caretaker of the new chapel, and the Aztec happily devoted the rest of his life to the shrine and to propagating the message of his noble lady. He led a life of great austerity and humility, and was soon regarded by his people as a holy man. He died on the 30th of May, 1548, and 3 days later, his friend, Bishop Zumarraga, joined him and the Lady of Tepeyac in eternity.
Juan Diego's name lives on in the hearts of his people, and many Mexican parents still bless their children by saying, "May God make you like Juan Diego." Interestingly enough, after almost 500 years, the Catholic Church conferred an honor on this, the least of her sons, in beatification rites held in 1990, when John Paul II, the Vicar of Christ on earth, on a pastoral visit to Mexico, paid honor to the Virgen del Guadalupe.
The tilma itself has been the subject of much research and speculation. This rough cloth is woven from ayate fiber, which comes from maguey, a common cactus plant that still grows on Tepeyac. The material normally deteriorates after 20 or 30 years, but the image and the tilma are still intact, despite what should have been the wear and tear of the last 460 years. For more than 100 years, the delicate fabric was unprotected by glass and exposed on a damp stone altar, kissed and fingered by millions of pilgrims, and swords and other objects touched it, yet it never frayed. Thousands of candles burned beneath it, and it was never blackened by soot. Acid was accidentally spilled over it, and it remained miraculously unharmed. In 1921, when the church in Mexico was violently persecuted by an anti-clerical government, a powerful time bomb was hidden in a bouquet of flowers and placed directly beneath the image. The bomb exploded at high mass and ripped out large sections of marble floors and shattered stained glass windows. The altar was devastated, and a heavy iron cross was twisted like clay. But the image was untouched, and the thin protective glass covering the cloth wasn't even shattered. Miraculously, too, none of the celebrants or members of the congregation were seriously injured. Art experts have marveled at how the rough surface of the cloth could have been painted on and yet appear smooth. Interestingly enough, whatever paint was used was not absorbed by the fibers, for the colors did not seep through the cloth, but only lay on the surface. And in 1936, the German Richard Kuhn, former Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, declared that there was no coloring of any kind in the fibers. The materials used to produce what resembled colors were not of animal, vegetable, or mineral dyes. The figure of the Virgin is 4 feet 8 inches high, and because of her tanned complexion, the Mexicans call her the Dark Virgin and consider her one of them. However, subsequent examinations have revealed that certain areas had been touched up, that her face and hands had been darkened, and the fingers shortened in an attempt to make her appear more Mexican. But her appearance is not that of a Mexican woman, for she is dressed in the fashion of women of Palestine.
Just about this time, there was a lot of interest on the Shroud of Turin, and a lot of scientists had successfully gotten the permission of the Archbishop Cardinal of Turin for a scientific investigation with this cloth. So the same thing was done, or hoped to be done, with respect to the tilma, the cactus fiber cloth on which the Blessed Mother's picture miraculously appeared. It was a very limited scientific investigation. It is not like anything that the Shroud of Turin underwent. It was more a photographic mission to determine whether the picture was a fake or not, with respect to whether it was painted or not. And they used infrared ray photography, which is used to find out whether a painting is fake or not, whether they're underlaying layers of paint, or whether the signature of the author is behind some brushwork. That's done today. Indicated that yes, there were brush marks on the image, that there were painting overlays in the rays of the sun, that a brooch had been added on, that a stole had been added on, that the black moon was painted over, and that these paints, as a matter of fact, can be seen visually as flaking off. So, to the question, therefore, is the image a fake? He said, we cannot say that, because the face is untouched. And it is inexplicable. Those are his very words, this art critic, the scientist. It is inexplicable. There is no explanation for the beauty of that face. And with respect to the flaking off of the sun's rays, or of the moon, or of the angels and so on, what I can say is that there is an underlying image under the paint, which shows that there was in the original a painting of a moon, an angel, and stars and rays of the sun, but which some well-meaning but a little stupid priest added on by painting on his own to probably make it more dramatic, whatever, and that is what is flaking off today. But underneath the flaking off paint, there is a latent original image behind it.
Now, what about the ongoing scientific investigations that there are images within the eye of the lady?
Well, this was discovered in 1935. I understand by a technician from Kodak who wanted to reproduce and make photographs, copies of the image of a lady. Because you see, the bishops had installed Guadalupe as the patroness of the Americas. Not only of Mexico, but of South and North America, including the United States. So they wanted pictures of her. Well, when this fellow went back to his lab and blew up her face, he discovered what looked like an image of a man on the right eye. He went back to Mexico and told the bishop, and the bishop told him to keep quiet. So he kept quiet about it. But after the war, another photographer again discovered the same thing. And this time the bishop said that couldn't be kept quiet anymore. That's why the world, the news was broadcast all over the world. And yes, indeed, if you take a look at a close-up of the right eye, you will see what looks like the figure of a bearded and mustached man kneeling in front of the lady of Guadalupe.
And who do they suspect it to be?
At that time, they didn't know who it was. They sort of thought it would be Juan Diego, but nobody knew what Juan Diego looked like. Until during, you see, the old cathedral of Mexico was something like our old cathedrals in Intramuros, like San Agustin. It was based, the base, the foundations of the basilica were on very poor ground, and the whole building was tilting. It was condemned. And so they decided to build a new basilica right next to it, a very modern structure. While they were cleaning up, they saw behind the main altar, they discovered a huge mural, several feet, maybe 30 feet across or something like that. It was the mural of a painting done in 1540, 1550 of an event describing the traslado, the transfer of the image on the tilma from the oratory of Bishop Sumaraga to the chapel which had been built. And the Indians were celebrating, and all the personages of Mexico were there. Bishop Sumaraga was there, Hernan Cortez was there, Juan Diego was there, Juan Bernardino was there, all depicted in the painting. And for the first time, we knew what Juan Diego looked like, and it's exactly the picture on the eyes. It's Juan Diego.
And now they're saying that there seem to be other images there as well?
Well, because of computer enhancement, an optical scientist has reduced the image to pixels. And he says he can detect on the other eye the image of Sumaraga, the image of the translator, the image of an Indian woman who's probably visiting at the same time, of a child, and several other things. But we're still investigating that. It's fascinating.
Today the tilma is protected by shatterproof glass and kept in a specially constructed safe behind the high altar. It is inspected once a year and opened only upon the instructions of the Cardinal of Mexico City. A moving ramp beneath it ensures a steady flow of traffic and equal viewing time. For the Virgen del Guadalupe is still honored and revered by millions of Mexicans. Her image is even found on taxicab doors. The saying, "all roads lead to Rome," could be applied to Guadalupe, for every December, hundreds of thousands of her children trek on foot to honor their mother. Specially constructed islands made wide enough for the pilgrims cut through broad avenues of the city and lead to the basilica. But even on ordinary days, the new basilica is visited by thousands of the faithful. Masses are celebrated every 30 minutes from early morning to 7 p.m. on a daily basis. The old basilica, which was badly damaged in the last earthquake, is now off limits, and reconstruction is slowly, very slowly, going on. But the museum behind it is still open to the public, and there also can be glimpsed what was once the excessive grandeur of the Catholic faith. For one of the old side chapels has been preserved, its breathtaking altars of silver towering above the cracks and shaken tiles. Impressive too are the hand-painted plaques detailing the thousands of miraculous cures, favors granted, and special protection of a compassionate mother. And as the Indians once utilized hieroglyphics in their petitions, so too does today's Mexican. Little tin ornaments are used to symbolize a request or prayer answered, and these are sold alongside religious items in the makeshift stalls and stores that surround the basilica. These are then collected from the church and arranged in the ancient picture-writing manner of the Aztecs and framed to hang on museum walls. Behind the basilica is the path that leads to the slope of Tepeyac. An old chapel still marks the spot where the Virgin first stood and where Juan Diego gathered the roses. And from here, one can look out over the rooftops of a polluted city and try to catch a glimpse of a world that Juan Diego had seen. But perhaps most remarkable of all are the people themselves. In all their simplicity and naivete, they come to visit their mother, some to give thanks, some to confide, some to request, some with a promise of leading better lives, and some just to see, but above all, to present oneself, one's family, one's newborn, to be welcomed by the mother into the family of God.
The effects of the conversion of pagan Mexico were far-reaching indeed, and the Lady of Guadalupe would soon be known throughout the world, even far across the globe, in a tiny archipelago that would be named after King Philip of Spain. The galleon trade provided the link, and documents exist in the archives of the Guadalupe Shrine on the parishes and provinces that were placed under the care of the Augustinian fathers sent to establish missions in the Philippines. These records not only give a demographical account of places like Hagonoy, Tondo, and Cebu, but also an idea of the rapid growth of the Catholic Church in the Philippines. And on the wall of the museum in Guadalupe is an enormous mosaic reproduction of the Virgin on the tilma, and the inscription underneath provides proof of this country's consecration to the Virgen del Guadalupe.